All right. Well, I guess we kind of head into getting started here. The reason these webinars are back is because we were receiving a lot of comments and questions about basic things in FileMaker and the FileMaker platform. They're like historic points that confuse people. And the FileMaker platform itself is really awesome. So what we've done is as we coach, as we are working with people, we take some of the more common questions, we peel those out, and we're going to be doing these webinars probably about once a week on various different topics. So the first half of the webinar will be kind of on the topic of ERDs, etc. And then what will end up happening is that the last half of the webinar will kind of open it up to questions, Q&A. At least that's kind of the plan, right? So you know what they say about best laid plans. So real quick, if you're looking for training, feel free to go to learningfilemaker.com. If you're looking to get started in the FileMaker platform, you're fairly new and you want to start a project and you don't want to have to build something from scratch, check out FM Starting Point. It's a free unlocked CRM, very popular. It is downloaded anywhere 50 to 100 times every day, depending upon what day you look at the downloads. It's a very, very popular application. A lot of companies, even some of our competitors, download Starting Point. They use it as a starting point for their projects. And of course, today's conversation is about understanding the basic building blocks down at the core level of FileMaker. You know, this idea of a database and tables and things like that, and understanding that is very, very important. So to help out with the conversation today, we do have a really great video that's out there. I highly recommend that after this conversation's over, if it's not totally sufficiently dialed in for you, watch this. A lot of people like this video, and so it's on YouTube. It's a free video, and basically instead of being technical about it, we kind of draw pictures and do it with pictures. So understanding relationships, very, very important topic, and that's why we're here today. Additionally, if you actually have our FileMaker 17 training, or if you have our bundles, we have bundles where we sell FileMaker together with Starting Point and all our training, like one complete bundle. It's a good deal. These are all the videos that cover relationships. So we're basically covering the top kind of 2 or 3 items on this list. It gets way deeper. And so if you want to learn more about the relationships, these videos here probably end to end are several 2-3 hours in length, at least, of just intense content. What's cool about these is that they're animated. So it's not just a boring voice that talks. For those of you who've seen the videos, you watch the videos, you know that these are really good. They're highly animated. And we try to incorporate some of that today in this webinar. So let's talk about understanding relationships. And Miles, once again, if you're there, you want to chime in. If people have questions, once again, visit myfilemaker.coach. And then down the bottom corner, press the button and then ask a question. So basically, FileMaker is this awesome platform that you can use to innovate in your workplace. The idea is that if you're in an office environment, a school, a nonprofit, wherever you're at, unless everything has been highly automated, you're probably using some outdated technology, even as far as Post-it notes and Excel spreadsheets, or maybe using some old technology that just doesn't work well. FileMaker is an awesome platform for building a customized application that refines and tunes your business workflow. It makes everyone there much more efficient. You get a lot more work done, right? That's the whole idea of FileMaker. You save time and money, right? So the relationship graph is an important part of understanding the FileMaker platform. It's kind of if I could pick the number one thing that confuses people out there, it's why there's actually a lot of people in this webinar. And why is that? Because understanding your business is one thing, and then understanding kind of the geeky part of the database is the other part of it. And the custom app has a database in it. That's what FileMaker is so great about. So the whole point today of webinar is wrap your heads around this. If you're still confused, please ask a question and then watch the video. But I want to make sure that I can do everything I can to help you understand this material. It's super important that you understand it if you're building an app. If you're working with a coach, the coach can walk you through it. If you have hired an outside developer, then you just wave your hands and the outside developer can take care of it. But I think there's a lot of benefit to understanding how to organize these specific ideas. And you'll see what I mean, because if you understand your business really well or your organization very well, then you're going to be able to actually document and write this down and kind of map it. It'll help you understand even your own business processes. Because sometimes people have business processes and they don't really even fully write them down. They just kind of do it ad hoc, right? And so understanding this and document it, writing it down, A, helps you build a FileMaker app. It helps you understand an existing FileMaker app. It's just super useful. So let's talk about terminology a little bit because you're going to hear me use lots of terms. Historically, FileMaker, and we'll say FMI going forward, FileMaker Incorporated. So FileMaker is the platform, which is a combination of products. FMI is the company with the hardworking people there that build the platform. They build the software that we use, right? Very important. They are owned as a subsidiary of Apple. So the company that released all these iPhones yesterday that were like fairly pricey. Anyway, they make FileMaker, which is really awesome. And so, yeah, so terminology, very, very important. So database, the term database is a term we'll use a lot today. Solution is a generic term. These are terms that have been used by FileMaker. Template is an older term that you've seen that used before too. Once again, a template, a solution, a database, a custom app, these all mean the same thing. What's important to understand about the FileMaker platform is that it's a database engine, but it's all these other things that make it awesome. It's not just a hardcore, database that's just, because strictly speaking, a pure database, all it is columns of numbers, like a giant Excel spreadsheet. That's what databases are. But as soon as you build the front end on it, the graphical front end, the buttons and the look and the feel, that's where FileMaker excels. It ties the database together with a beautiful front end with modern technology and mobile apps and all these types of things. More things I could even list. So that's really what FileMaker is great about. So if you hear me say the word database, solution, template, or custom app, those all mean the same thing, just the way that is. So today we're discussing the mechanics of basically a database or relational database. What we're discussing today is pretty much universal, even with SQL or Oracle or some other data system like that. FileMaker has some extreme benefits over these technologies that we're not going to discuss today because it's only 1 hour webinar. So, but understand that what you're learning here is not just FileMaker mechanics, this is universal, okay? So step one, identify entities, right? So at the core of a FileMaker custom application is the idea of storing data. So we're going to store data, and what you have to do as a person who is building a custom FileMaker application, you have to be able to identify in your organization or your business processes the main elements of what you want to track. That right there is a foreign concept to a vast majority of people. I've even had interns come to work for me not understanding this concept of really what is an entity. Now, in the world of database, they call it an entity. It's the same thing as a table. So once again, a terminology. So what are the tables? What are the entities that you have to track? So people get that confused with fields. They get it confused with other things. So what is a table? It's a group of like data, right? We're talking about a person, place, or thing. It's a critical element in your business that you're tracking. It's a major component, right? So the idea is that to identify the entities, you're going to want to come up with a list of items that you want to track. If you have no idea about this and you're there, and if you have questions about your business and an idea, say like what you're doing and what are the entities you're trying to track. A common one is if you're in business, I'll do two examples. One is a business that sells things and they track customers' invoices. So the email of a person, right, or the name of a person. Those are things you want to track, but the overall entity itself is a person. It's a human being, right? We assume that's your customer. Then the invoice itself is a transaction. It's where they came in, they bought something. That is an entity. So a table could be a customer contact or person kind of table, a people table. And then you can have a transaction table, which would be like your invoice, right? If you're in education, right, then you would have the people that are teachers, right? And those would be different than the people that are students. So really you would probably have a instructor or teacher or professor table, right? Because they're really kind of different and you want to track and manage them differently than you would want to manage the students, right? So you'd have in that situation, you would have two tables. So what is a table? It's a group of fields. What are a field? Well, it's like the little columns in Excel, right? And so the idea for most of you here, you understand what fields are, but really understanding the tables, it's the grouping of those tables. So this is very important that you identify these correctly. when a FileMaker developer or any database developer you talk to in your business, the first thing they're going to do if they're supposed to help build something for you is they're going to have to understand what these are. That's the basis, the building blocks of the organization. What are your problems? Why are you having problems? And if we want to build an app that helps fix that, we have to kind of structure it so it makes sense. So most business people can identify these. So if I ask an office manager or the owner of a business and she says, hey, I have customers, but then I have invoices, but then I invoice them every month, or, come up with all the elements and you start mapping out and drawing them together. And that's really the important thing of what we do. We're looking for the major categories of these items, right? Once again, first name, last name are important, address is important, but is that the major category, right, that we're trying to track? So what are the major items of focus that you want to track in your database? And so there are little tips along the way that I'm giving you to help you identify these. So if you identify, let's just pick something important like classroom number or a classroom number. It's a room where they're going to have a lecture or a class, right? Are there subcomponents to that you're going to be tracking? Not really. Okay, so maybe the classroom number is a field, right? Or it's a table, right? That's where you have to decide. For example, first name are there sub-elements to first name? Not really, but first name is a sub-element of a person or a customer, right? Makes sense. So if there are sub-elements, that probably means that you're looking at a table potentially. If there are no sub-elements, then maybe you're looking at a field. So like email address, are there other descriptive things about the email address that you would write up on there? Well, generally no. People write the email address and that would be all they would do, right? So maybe that's a field. So that's kind of one of those little things. Are there sub-elements to the item that you're identifying? So once again, we get this idea of what is an attribute. Now, attribute is the relational database term for fields. So attributes are fields, entities are tables. In the FileMaker world, they just use table and fields, right? The FileMaker world, they try to abstract it and make it as simple as possible. Once again, this is important for us to master this. And if you're stuck, watch that video that we pointed out, or ask a question to one of the coaches. They'll be happy to give you some guidance on this. Or ask a question here. Miles, if you have questions along the way, feel free to stop me, right? So here we go. So we're trying to identify whether we have fields or tables. Very important concept. If you define a field, you think you have a field, and you don't know what it belongs to, like what would be the major topic of it. Say, for example, that I decide I am going to define a field called person. Okay, and I'm trying to decide that field called person belongs to something, but I don't know what it would belong to, right? Maybe that we're dealing that the person is a table, not a field, right? So it's another one of these little tricks that, are there items below it, and then are there items above it that you can identify? It's not concrete, but you start to feel your way with this. It gets to a point after you've done this a little bit that you can just do it automatically. In fact, people who've been doing databases for any period of time can do this very easily. They just automatically see it. And for us, as a developer, or as me as a trainer, because I spend most of my time training in videos or training live webinars, 95% of what I personally do is to help train, to educate you. I want you to be successful, right? This isn't about me doing a bunch of crazy stuff and, buying a Ferrari and making $1 billion. This is actually, at the end of the day, this is about me making you successful. It really is. So ask your questions as we keep going here. I have to keep drinking as we go. Miles, if you have any questions, so I can take a tactical drink from my 0-calorie Gatorade.
Yeah, we had someone ask, why not just put everything in one table?
Okay, so the issues with tables, this is such an awesome question. Why not just stick everything in one table? Because people do that with Excel spreadsheets. They just take an Excel spreadsheet and they just put everything on there. Because we want to be able to do reporting primarily. You want to be able to do things with it, and reporting is a big one. Like, I want a report of all the students that did this, or all the teachers who haven't taken vacation time, or all the customers that are due for a renewal of something. And to do a report applies primarily to one table at a time. You can bring attributes in from other things, but the idea is that you're going to build a report that'll revolve around that table, that one thing. That's kind of the basic concept. Now, reports can get pretty crazy where you're mixing and matching lots of data together, but the idea is that if you itemize things and individualize them, customers, invoices, inventory, a product catalog, right, is different than the inventory that you actually have in the store, right? Makes sense? So it's important to, if you can individualize these things, then you can go into the system and say, show me all the inventory items that are in the warehouse that are running below a certain number, we're running out of, and we need to reorder to restock the warehouse. Supply chain issues, right? Well, if you had people mixed in there, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. And so the idea is that you really have to individualize these things. That's not a FileMaker thing. That is kind of the relational world that was created. I don't know when they created the first relational. I mean, mathematicians and philosophers have been playing with this, but I think in terms of modern relational structures and things, I think that was a 50s or 60s thing, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, maybe I talked about it before that, but the first time it was really seriously kicked over was really not that far in our past, right? So another tip, does the item that you're trying to track occur more than once? So for example, if I have a person, there are persons that says Miles is assisting me here. Miles Debsky, fantastic guy, senior engineer, very talented individual. Some of you here, probably his customers that work with him. So you know what I'm talking about. So Miles is in our staff, our person database. Does Miles occur more than once? Well, really, there's only one Miles, and Miles is Miles, and he doesn't have a clone, right? We're not cloning people yet. At least we don't think we are, right? So therefore, he's in there once. That makes sense as a person. But if I say an example came the other day where you had, they were talking about healthcare, like we're going to do enrollment in insurance, right? And they have open enrollment. So when you go to open enrollment, you're going to do an enrollment in insurance. And then like once a year, twice a year, whatever they have this open enrollment, you can go in and sign up for the health insurance that you want, right? Makes sense. But that's like something that happens, like say, for example, in this case, every year. So you would have an enrollment, but the enrollment's not a one-time thing. It's really something that occurs multiple times. So as soon as you get into a thing that has a recurring concept to it, then you need to think about, a great example is this is a great example. You're going to offer English 1A or Algebra 1A in high school, right? Now, Algebra 1A is in the catalog as a course that is offered, okay? So it's in the course catalog, but Algebra 1A might be offered 3 or 4 times a year. So that's a classic case where you have two tables. One is a catalog of all the items that you might have. The second one is the occurrences of those. So you're going to have to figure out that every occurrence you want to track, because remember, a fall algebra class will be different than the winter algebra class, different than the spring algebra class, or different than the summer one, where students take that who got busted, who got an F or something, have to come back for summer school, right? So a classic example of 4 classes would be really 4 records in a class that recurs frequently. We would typically call these, we come up with terminology in your organization to help define this. So I had a customer that we were doing this. We called a course was a course catalog, and then one of those courses that occur would be called either a session or a class. And so math class would happen like 4 times. So you have two tables. They're similar, but one is like there's only one math 1A ever, and it has a description. It doesn't tell you who's enrolled in it, because that would be the math 1A that's in winter. That's what makes it unique, right? So that's the idea. So we get to this idea where we've identified, say, for example, customers, payments, and invoices, for example, or you can have, in our case, we could have students on the left, and we could have teachers and class catalog and sessions, right? So the idea is that you identify these, and then down below here, you can see my mouse bounce around a little bit. You can see these are the fields that are going to go under there. So this is where you start drawing on a paper plate or a napkin or something. You start to draw this out just to kind of get your head wrapped around it. Because the first time you do this, you're going to get it wrong. Most people get it wrong. And then you start to investigate the business process. And so you start to learn all this. So let's talk about terminology. So if we've identified the tables, we understand that what these tables are. And once again, if you're stuck, ask a question. We'll definitely help you out, because that was the first hurdle. There's about 3 hurdles here in sequence. The second one is understanding relationships. That's really our second hurdle. We call it step 4 here, but really it's the second major piece, is understanding relationship. A relationship at the end of the day is a connection between two tables, okay? And there'll be a field on one side and a field on the other side, and you draw a line between them and it connects them. So if the values match on one side and they match on the other side, there's a connection there, a match. FileMaker calls it a match. I call it lock-on or missile lock-on, right? I'm an old Top Gun fan from the old days, a pilot. And so the idea is that if you have one record, it can connect or lock on to the other one through that relationship. But the values in those two fields have to match. So a key from our perspective today in our training session, a key is going to be a field that allows us to connect two sides, okay? Now, there's a thing called a primary key. Every table needs to have a primary key. This is a unique ID. Typically, in the old days or even modernly, it could be a serial number. It starts at 1 and it just increments up, right? Some people, for those of you who are a little bit more deeper, there is a random code generator called UUID, and it can generate a random, however many 30 some odd digit ID that will never be repeated over like 15 billion times. It's like a random lottery number kind of thing, except it's instead of like 5 lottery numbers to win the Powerball or whatever, this is like 32 numbers. So it's never ever guessed. And so you can have the system automatically generate that. For training, I prefer just to use serial numbers. So number 1, number 2, number 3. And that way, when you're learning, you can see that record 3 over here connected to the 3 over here, if that makes sense. Makes it easier to learn the material. So primary key is the unique one in each table. It'll never be duplicated. That's like a felony no-no. You never have a 2 number 3s in there, right? And it's never empty. So you have it to be an auto-enter serial number. We talk about that. Foreign key is a field that's used to connect on the child side of the relationship. And you're going, what is a child, right? It's good that you ask. So people say, well, what is a parent? What is a child side? This is an important concept. So it's all about perspective, okay? So say that our entire system are a table called customers and payments, right? And it's about the perspective of the person at the time we're looking at this. So say that we're on a screen or a layout in FileMaker, and we want to look at the customer, and we want to see the payments that this customer has made. So obviously you understand there's a payments table and a customer table, and somehow there's a relationship from there. Well, the idea is to connect the primary key, right, that's unique to the customer. Say that it's Miles Debsky, and he's customer 0003, number 3, and he's made a payment, okay? Well, then his payment records over there would have 003 over here in this position right here. And so that would be his payment records. And that's how the relationship connects. But child and parent are very movable. It's based on your perspective. So say we're on a layout, we're talking about customers, then the Lego guy is us. That is us. That's the layout that we're on, the screen that we're on. That's our perspective, okay? And so, by the way, this is a generic Lego guy, not a trademarked brand name Lego guy. So I probably shouldn't use the word Lego guy. We should come up with another name. Connectable blocks guy, right? So anyway, the idea is that we have parent and child, right? But if we had a screen or a layout where we're looking at the payments, a list of payments down the page, and we wanted to see what customer had made that payment, right? Then we're on a screen where the parent is there. That's our parent side, and our child side is the other side. So parent and child, and actually if you connect one more, it's a grandchild. Those are movable pieces. Understand that our perspective can change, right? When you build a relational graph and you build all this out, you're going to have a whole bunch of these boxes, not 2. You're going to have 20 or 30 of them or whatever you're going to have. And so you're going to build a layout, and the Lego guy sits at a specific spot on that graph. And that's what the Lego guy can see. It's very, very important that you understand that. So that's the perspective, because Lego guy can see his fields here, and he can only see anything that has a connection with a live connection. So if he's on this record right here, he can see through here if there's a match. So if we're on invoice number 5001, customer is number 3, or 003, whatever we're doing with that, then it would go over there and it would have lock on or match to the customer side, and it would say, Miles Debsky, he lives in Texas or wherever he lives, and it would provide that information. So the perspective is super important. So One, understanding and defining your entities or tables. Number two is kind of structuring them out and understanding kind of what the fields are and understanding what the relationships are likely to be in your business. You don't have to get technical. Initially, just do this from a business side. Get out a piece of paper. I have some really awesome Post-it notes that are like 3 feet by 4 feet or 2 feet by 3 feet. They're giant poster-sized Post-it notes, and they're even sticky on like that strip. And we lay these things out, and we go to town drawing all over these because I'm a big one on using pen and paper initially because I can sketch faster on that than I can on a computer. It allows me to spread it out over a table, and we do that with a customer or training or whatever we're doing to identify these items. So then we figure out that the business has a customer or students or classes or whatever. We kind of start to connect them. And then after that, you have to start about thinking about the layouts that you're going to build, because if you build a layout, every layout, you could write this, it's not written down here, but it probably should be written down. Every layout has a Lego guy, and he sits on a graph like this somewhere, okay? So I'm going to move down a little bit here. I'm going to continue with the terminology here. Just I'm going to reinforce this. So key is a field that's being used in a relationship somewhere. A primary key is there's only one of those per table, and it's a serial number. Although I guess you could have more than one serial number running in a table, but in the business, the database people like to have absolutes. It makes their life feel better. Technically, you could have more than one serial number, but why, right? Don't use, for example, the person's phone number as a primary key or their last name as a primary key. Now, if you're building a database, you want to do that, that's totally cool. But keep in mind that people's phone numbers change. Their email addresses change. I've actually had in my company 2 Steve Allens at one time, legitimately 2 Steve Allens, different middle names, but other than that, there was 2. I'd say Steve Allen, and they go, and I get 2 people say what? A first name and a last name together don't make a great key because it's not unique. The whole idea with a primary key is it's going to be unique. The foreign key is what you're going to attach on the child side to the primary key so you can see that data. Historically, this is very common, very, very common. The relationship between 2 keys, let me move this around. So, I lost my thing. There we go. The relationship is between 2 keys and 2 tables. Most of the time, it's between a primary key and a foreign key, but that's not 100% concrete. If you built some sort of special report, you could build a report through a relationship. You could use some other keys and things like that. It doesn't have to be necessarily that way. So the idea is that you get to a completed ERD. An ERD is an entity relationship diagram, or if we change out the word terminology, it would be a table relationship diagram. This is a kind of a standard thing that we see with Oracle, SQL, all these big database systems, including FileMaker. This is beneficial to draw this. Now, FileMaker won't have this in it. It doesn't do ERDs. It does things that look like ERDs, but they're different, right? And that's kind of the next piece that we want to talk about. And of course, we're running through time here. Do we have questions on this at all, Miles?
Yeah, we actually have a couple great ones. One of them, while we're on this slide, someone actually asked if you have a recommended software to create ERD diagrams.
I used to have one. It was a Draw.io or something like that. You could look around for that. Maybe one of the guys here can check it out. Oh, okay, someone just wrote that. Christian did Draw.io. Okay. Is it Draw.io, Christian? Are you there, Christian? You want to unmute yourself? We have our head of our coaching services team, Christian, is here. Christian.
Yes, it's Draw.io. And I know a lot of the coaches here in the office very much like that one, especially because it's free. So it's really easy for our clients to use as well.
Okay, good. All right, so that's a good one. So Draw.io is still there. That's good. Another question, Miles?
Yeah, another one is, how should I name my primary and foreign keys?
Okay, well, every developer seems to have a different style for this. Normally what we do is here's the thing. FileMaker likes to sort things alphabetically. It's a really easy way to find the fields in there. I like all the IDs to show up together in a, if I go to, I don't know, I don't want to overwhelm people, but I'm not going to go to that. But I normally put the word ID an underscore. So this is a screenshot off the internet. I would normally reverse these. I would say ID underscore contact or ID underscore invoice. And the reason is that when you sort alphabetically, all the IDs are grouped together in the field names together. They're not spread all over. Now, some people will put an underscore at the end and put a little P or a F to indicate that's a primary or a foreign key. If that helps you, that's great. I think that's not a bad thing necessarily. So my suggestion would be ID underscore invoice, and or you could add a P or an F on the end of that to indicate it's a primary key. Now, primary key, it basically means it's an auto enter serial number, right? So that you go into FileMaker, you say automatically enter a serial number, and it does a serial number. That's the basic one. A foreign key is just going to be either a number field or a text field that's blank a vast majority of the time. It gets populated as you put data in. That's another conversation. But the primary key always is never empty, right? So every time you create a new record, it puts a number in there. So if we create a new record, say we have 3 records, Miles is number 3. I create a new record for Christian. Christian would automatically be number 4, right? And those numbers never duplicate, and there's always a value in there. They're never blank. Quite more questions, Miles, on that?
I think we can continue on from here.
Okay, so moving along. So this is really important. So I need to kind of transition between this slide here and the next slide. So this is an ERD. In an ERD, there is only, every table is on screen once, okay? An ERD is a good for you as a developer or basic FileMaker person, or you're just a business person trying to understand what the heck you're doing. The customer's on here once, the payments are on here once, invoice, the students, everything is on here once, and then you'll have all these lines going all over the place, even circular lines, like you might connect the customers to some sort of email list or something like that, which also then cross connects back to the invoice, because they say you send them an email off an email list, and then they bought off that email list. So you'd want to like kind of track that if you could, so you know what emails were working for you. But then that would create a circular sort of reference, because if the email was up here, you connect it up that way. You come down here to invoice. So that's what an ERD is. FileMaker is not an ERD. Remember the Lego thing? This is another super critical piece. This is like the piece. FileMaker doesn't use ERDs. They do things that kind of look like ERDs. These little windows here can pop down, and what these are table occurrences. It's an occurrence of a table. So notes can be on here many times on this screen. I just took this one little section out of FM Starting Point. That's our free CRM that we built. And you can tell that we number things, right? So we put, so the numbering, I try to come up with I number our scripts so I can find them. I number our layouts. I'll put the name behind it, but I need a number or some sort of identifier in the front so I can find it. So this is what we call a table occurrence group. It's a group of connected, basically it's a group of connected tables, kind of like an ERD is the idea, but notes can be on here somewhere else. This, in other data systems, they call this a view. A view, once again, is basically, from our perspective, a layout is attached to this. So Lego guy is a layout in our FileMaker system, a screen in our FileMaker system, and that is his perspective. Every layout has to be attached basically to a perspective, and that's what we do. We attach a layout to a perspective, and that layout can see things through that perspective. Does that make sense? Right. So it's very important to understand. Yeah, it's very important to understand that that's really the difference here. So whereas an ERD previously, you can only have customers or notes on here once, and then and it's like Ghostbusters, they don't cross the streams, right? Well, in ERDs, you cross the streams all the time, right? And because you have lines that are crossing, etc. In FileMaker, there's no loop here where this can go here, this can go here, and then it goes over here, and then it comes back around and reconnects. That's crossing the streams, no bueno, okay? It has to be a linear process. Now, keep in mind, the Lego guy can go anywhere you want it to go, but the FileMaker will not allow you to connect in a circular loop, because the problem is if you're looking, remember the Lego guy's looking here, he can only see these 4 other connected relationships, right? So that means that your layout can only see those 4 connected relationships, right? So if you did a circular, say there was another one over here, right? And you connected that way, and then for whatever reason you had a relationship that connected back this way, the Lego guy wouldn't know which way to look. He could look at the end through one path or the end through another path. It confuses Lego guy. That's not allowed. So the FileMaker file can go through and see one path. There's only one path to any destination. That makes sense? This is like the third and last piece that's a real bear to manage. So entities and kind of managing relationships, and then this understanding of translating it into something that normal humans can say. Because I can get here and put my professor hat on and say, into a relationship, attributes, multi-predicate key. I start talking like super professor, but that doesn't help any of you. Okay, I want to help you, explain to you. So we use Lego Guy, and Lego Guy is your layout, right? And so if we actually, I'm going to go and exit out real quick here. I'm going to bail on PowerPoint. Oh, there's my screen. Oh, there's that screen. I'm going to minimize myself. I don't need to see myself. I'm going to kill my Slack account. I don't need to see Slack firing up. You people are asking questions. That's good. Awesome. So if I go over here to FM starting point, I'm going to fire up FM starting point, and I'm going to go into the relational diagram. I go File, Manage, Database. So File, Manage, Database gets us into this database area. So first off, let's start with tables. So these are the tables we have. So identify the tables, every little box. So contacts, documents, estimates, invoices, invoice line items, things like that. And then we get over, FileMaker calls it relationships. And these are, I'm going to kind of zoom it backwards a little bit, so to try to like frame it a little bit. And so what we do in FileMaker is that, I'm not trying to get you to read the lines here, but we have there's a Lego Guy. Lego Guy can sit on any of these boxes anywhere, but we normally have him sit on the big box on the left. There's a strategy for this, different set of videos called Anchor Buoy. We could talk about that sometime, a different hour-long conversation. But the point is, the Lego Guy can sit there, then he only can see the things that we've wired in for him to see. If I put the Lego Guy here, he can see the things that we wired in for him or her to see. Lego Guy could be him or her, right? Lego person, I guess I should be. Lego person. I guess, Lego person. Is that politically correct? Anyway, so you get the idea. So Lego person can sit at any of these locations, and that is the layout that they can see. That is super important. So nowhere do we actually have in here an ERD. Remember the ERD with the little white boxes? That doesn't exist in FileMaker. Nowhere do they do that. They actually go from, here's a table. Then I want to look at the fields and contacts. So I'm going to go and I wonder if I can, I double clicked it. It popped up. So it popped in this middle section. So here are the fields for contacts. And I can look at different fields for different things. So entity or table, then the attributes, which are fields. And then it kind of skips the ERD because it doesn't really need it. And it says, how do you want the Lego Guy to see things? Is basically what this screen says. And so understand that, and the tables can be on here more than once. For example, if I'm on a contact screen, so the contact Lego Guy sits over here. Over here somewhere in here is invoices, okay? Trust me, it's in there somewhere. The invoice table is in there. But if I jump to an invoice screen, then Lego Guy is up here. He's on invoices here. That means invoices on two spots on this window here, right? That's not an ERD because invoices could only be once, right? So it's all about the view. It's super, super, super important to master this kind of concept. So we're kind of getting the question time. So you guys line up some questions if you have questions. Miles, you got questions there at all?
Yeah, I got one here that maybe we could even show. Someone asked, how can I see all records through a relationship?
All records through a relationship, right? So if you're on Lego, so once again, we're talking Lego Guy or person, Lego person, and we can see all of the records through the relationship. You can do what they call a Cartesian join for that. It's a little bit outside. I'm like talking like a super, where's the notes one at? Oh, here's notes. Here's a simple one here. Okay, so this is a very simple one. So this is notes. So you have a note. And if you think about the business process, a note can be attached to an account. Account is what we call a company or organization. In our case, the starting point, we just call them accounts because a lot of business people would consider it an account. It's not a person. A person is a contact. That's the one right below there. If you want to look at that, I can zoom in a little bit more here so you can see all this. And then, of course, we have this thing called a preference table. That's another conversation we could have, but it's an idea where you have one record and you have like preference settings that you can save in there. Kind of cool. And then a note could also be attached to a project. Now, if I go in here and actually click on my tools and I click on, let's just say accounts right here, I double click this, I'm going to see the relationship right here. So ID account over here, on the note side, technically that is a foreign key on this side. And over here, it's a primary key on this side, on the account side. And so what you do is to build a relationship, you identify the field over here, you identify the field over here, and you say add it, and this is what is the connection right here. Now, notice I said ID underscore. It might be helpful here if I said underscore over here, this would be underscore F for foreign key, and underscore P for primary key, right? And as you get experience with this, you'll understand where the primary keys and the foreign keys fit, right? For example. But if we wanted to have every, and actually this has been known to have been a test question before at certain places. If you want to have this record for whatever reason, it's not a really good example, but if you wanted it to be on notes and you wanted to see a list of all the accounts in the system, all the contacts in the system, you would change this to a Cartesian join, right? So what you do is you double click it and you're going to come up here and you're going to say a Cartesian join and you would say change. And actually at the end of the day, it doesn't particularly matter what's on the two sides here. Cartesian join means that anything here will match anything over here. A lot of times in FM starting point, that right there is another abstract concept. I prefer for training purposes to set something what we call ID constant. ID constant in my world, and this is predates this feature, but it's always a 1. So if you think about it, if you want every record on one side to connect to every record on the other side, you need the same thing on both sides. And if you have a number 1 here and then all these are number 1s over here, then they connect. It's easier for me to explain to people, well, let's just set up a number 1 everywhere and that way it connects, right? And you go, oh, that's kind of cool. So 1 connects to all the other ones, right? Yeah, but all of them are 1. So it's very simple because instead of saying no matter what it's going to connect, right? Down here, that's what the Cartesian join means. We just would simply say, we would say equals, and I would say ID constant over here to ID constant. It's just a different way of doing it. This is not official FileMaker training. This is my training. This is me trying to teach you the easiest way to understand it. And so that the ID constant is always defined to be a 1 in every table. It's just the way we do it, the starting point. There's some other benefits to it that I don't want to dig into too deep, but 2 ways to do it. The Cartesian is the question and answer that you'll see on a certain test somewhere if you ever take a certain test. Okay, so just understand that. So if you're trying to restrict it or something, as soon as you put the X in there, there's no restriction. It's everything. So next question, Miles.
Yeah, I don't know if we really want to dive into this, but someone was asking what the difference is between seeing an equal sign on the relationship there and an X.
That's exactly what I just covered, right? So that's exactly the same thing. Yeah, you're obvious. So Miles is actually responding to tech support and didn't get the entire conversation, but that's what the X is. The X is the Cartesian join. That is really, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter per se what these two values are, left and right. When you put the X in, it always connects everything, right? So it's kind of a little bit of an abstract. It's like an everything, all, right? I guess you could say all right here, ALL, and that would probably be more descriptive. Instead of an X, it'd be ALL, and it's everything. But yeah, that's what that is. That's what they call a Cartesian join. So obviously not equals, and then greater than or less than. Those are really useful for doing reports, right? Doing through a relationship and seeing like a bunch of them that are over a certain date or that kind of idea. That's where the greater than or equals who's comes into. Most of this conversation is about an explicit record here locking onto a specific record here. And then now we've covered Cartesians, which is one record here connecting to all records over here. Regardless of found set, it don't matter. It connects to all, okay? And that's what we're doing there with the X. And that was the test question, right? So what the question would be like, well, if you're over here and you use a Cartesian join, and then Fred goes over here and has a found set over here or does something to try to restrict this, what will the results be? The results will be all records because a Cartesian is absolute and it doesn't care. It does everything, right? So there you go.
Cool. The next one, someone's asking how you would view on a layout either the child records or even a grandchild record.
Okay, so step one is that the Lego guy has to be on the screen, okay? So let's try to keep it simple. So we'll talk about notes right here. So here's notes, TO4, and then TO4 A, B, and C. These are, so this is from our perspective, the Lego guy is standing right over here, right? Oh, I'm drawing, you can't see my hand. I'm so let me move it over here. The Lego guy is right here, and so he can see these 4 right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel. I'm gonna say discard. I'm actually going to go to the notes is over here, right? Is that where that's at? There we go, notes. So this is the notes data entry screen. So if I go to layout mode, so I'm in browse mode right now. So this is our starting point CRM. If I go to layout mode, I want to edit the layout or Command or Control L, okay? So this is FileMaker 17. It pops out with our left and right. I call them water wings, but they kind of pop out, right? But they're basically panels that give all the tools that we need. And so up here at the top, we can see that this layout is connected to TO4 notes. So if I go over here and I say layout setup, just so you can see this, when you set up a layout, it's going to require that you attach it somewhere. So we actually attach it to, this is one of those things that's really misleading about the FileMaker platform. And every once in a while, you want to reach through the computer and slap someone, right? Because things are kind of mislabeled. Okay, so if I come over here, it says table. That's actually a table occurrence. It's not the table. We're not attaching the layout to a table. We're attaching it to an occurrence on the graph. That should say table TO is what it should say. So once again, that's why I'm here to help, right? So we go over here and we say connect to TO4 notes, or I could attach it to any other spot. So this is basically moving our Lego guy, right? Moving him to some other place. I want him on the left side right there so we can see those 4. So if I go right here, then I hit OK, then all the fields, if I drag a field on here, right? If I want to drag this, a little tool to drag a field on this layout, I drag a field on here. Here it is. Here's the whole picture right here. This is why we do the little groups, the TOG groups, the little groups of TOs. There, the layout or a Lego guy, should say Lego guy or person, Lego person, is here on TO4 notes, and he can see only these items here. They are related, TO4A, TO4B, TO4C. Once again, we use the O4s and ABC to group them together and keep them nice and neat. Then we say kind of what the connection is, right? And so we can select something else over here if we want, right? But that is an unrelated record. It will never work. I probably ought to put a little X on it or explode it or a little fireball, right? But it allowed us to put a field on the layout that will never work because it's not part of the connection. If I go back to field definitions, I go back to relationships, I go to notes, where the hell did notes go? Did I miss it? Or is it over on the right somewhere? Oh, it's 4. There, sorry, right here. So notice that these are the 4. These things here match the available fields over here. That's what drives that, right? Makes sense? So the lights are going on. So the Lego guy, so right here, we said that we put the Lego guy on TO4, Lego person, he's right here, and he can only see these 4, or she's right here, can only see these 4, okay? Yes? Makes sense? And that's kind of a big deal. I mean, it's really a big deal. And that is grossly mislabeled, so. But someone decided that it would make more sense that way, I guess. So anyway, questions?
Yeah, a couple people were asking about when you open that up, it kind of clicked for some of them about the naming convention on how you actually name the different TOGs.
Yeah,
how it plays a factor.
Okay, so if you have our training course, it's videos. Miles, am I right? Is it 11:30 and 31 or 12:30, 31? If you could confirm those numbers. But for those of you who are really trying to learn this, and you want a really awesome video training course, just go get our video training course. It's not much money, and I spend literally to put this in perspective. My FileMaker 17 video course is almost 60 hours. That's like 5 seasons of your favorite TV show. Okay, and we do that every year. So if you want to know what I do all the time when you don't see me here, I'm like making videos in this room. So 60 hours. No one else puts together a 60-hour video course on the FileMaker platform. It's the only course like this, despite what anyone might tell you, that's the only one. So that being said, the design style is called anchor buoy. If you have someone who doesn't know anything about relational diagrams, you're going to typically get one diagram where everything's connected to every other one, and it looks like a real mess, and it is a mess. We call that kind of a spider diagram, or a mess. I call it a mess. This is organized, and the numbering of 0, 1 is arbitrary. It's just that I started at number 1, then I went to number 2 and number 3 and number 4. And then if I deleted something out of here, I didn't need it anymore, then I would have a gap. I could go put something else back in there if I wanted, but it's totally arbitrary. I call it T for TO. That's what that stands for, T for TO. And then I make sure that all these here are attached. So that basically, this is called, once again, Miles, you have the numbers on there. Let me know. You can interrupt me. But we have videos that cover the concept of organizing the TOs this way. And so technically the naming, and if you talk to FileMaker developers, this is like having a conversation about, whether I like a Chevy truck or a Ford truck. Some of you don't know anything about trucks, but that's like a religious war, right? To be honest with you. So I like this car, I like that car. No, that car sucks. So naming conventions in the FileMaker community are a lot like that. This is the one we use because it's pretty easy to understand. So TO1 and then TO, these are all the ones that connect to TO1, A, B, C, D. And eventually, because we're upgrading, starting point, moving things around, the numbers might get a lot out of sequence at some point. I could technically name this the same. I don't know if I can give it exactly the same name. I don't think it'll take that. But the idea is I think these names, I think they need to be, let's try this. Let's just see here. See if I can give it the exact same name. Okay, I tried to give it the same name and FileMaker won't allow that, but instead of giving you an error message, it puts a number 2 right there if you saw that. So I tried to give 2 of them the exact same name, so the TO names have to be unique. And FileMaker will enforce that by even sticking an ID and a serial number on the back of it, right? But that's why we serialize it for us. So instead of me looking at a bunch of TOs and the names way down at the end, I don't have to look at the names. I just look at the front. If I'm on layout accounts, right? So say, for example, I hit cancel here. I say discard. I'm on the accounts data entry screen. I go to edit the layout right here, big button, or I can hit Command or Control L. Then the table occurrence, TO, table TO, is TO1 account. So this layout can only see, so if I double click right here and it says this is the field that you have, but it can be in these other ones. So notice that the Lego person has a much broader selection in this situation because it's on that group. If you build a relational diagram and you connect everything together, then all you're going to get is a list here of everything, a mishmash, and the whole thing is a squirrel's mess. It's a giant mess, right? I mean, do you want to have to hunt through all this? Oh, let's hunt for that. No, let's hunt for that. No, let's hunt for that. It'd be better just to have a subset of what you need in this situation, right? In fact, what's interesting about this is that Hansa from a company called 24U, he's a Czechoslovakian, I think. He is one of the, he's like an expert ninja in the FileMaker platform, and he did performance testing recently, last year, with FileMaker with the different relational diagrams and stuff, and he found out that the anchor buoy methodology either was the fastest or it tied for the fastest design in terms of overall speed. If you put 1 million records in the system, anchor buoy gave you the fastest speed. Either it was tied with one other design style or it was the fast. It was like amazing. And years ago, people used to think it was slower, and maybe back then it was, but right now it's the fastest design style. Spider diagram would actually make your solution slower. Notice measurably slower with a stopwatch. He stopwatched everything. So anyway, so I always love it when I get to talk to other FileMaker experts in the community and they teach me something I don't know. Because I learn every day, I learn new things just like a lot of you are here learning. So we're kind of heading towards the end of the webinar. Do we have any final questions here? I guess I should point out the fact that a lot of you have been talking to our FileMaker coaches. If you want a FileMaker coach, some one-on-one training like this, except it'd be just you and a FileMaker coach, feel free to email or reach out to us at support@RC Consulting. The FileMaker coaches, generally, they are half off of our normal hourly rate. They're fairly inexpensive relative to a regular FileMaker developer, and they can do a lot to help you. It's really good stuff. So, I mean, that's my unbiased plug about that. But I expect a lot of you to do this on your own, right? For those of you who want to accelerate the learning, get the video training. If the video training isn't fast enough or doesn't teach you exactly what you want to know, then that's where a coach comes in. So we have kind of free training, then organized training, and which is like $79, or if you want the bundle, it's like $200 or whatever it is. And then if you want a coach, then it's basically half off. The price is pretty good. So Miles, last final question as we wind down here.
Yeah, just to comment on that, you were correct before. In our video course, it is 11:30 and 11:31. Talks all about Anchor Buoy and answers a bunch of those questions.
So if you want to know why we group things like that, it's called Anchor Buoy, and it's the fastest design style that you can use in terms of overall performance. Not that I say that, but the guy that is the #1 speed freak in the FileMaker community, Hansa from 24U, good FileMaker company if you're in Europe, somewhere across the pond, as we say, right? Not in North America. He's a really good developer. He does some amazing stuff. He was at the FileMaker Developer Conference. Really cool stuff. Lots of integration with like hardware, like having a FileMaker talk to external sensors and servos and controlling stuff. Pretty cool stuff. So that's a plug for Hansa. Definitely awesome guy, and he did all the speed testing on that. So that's the why you would use Anchor Buoy. Now the naming conventions, once again, don't matter so much, but the fact that you create the Lego guy has his little environment, and then if you switch layouts, he has a different little environment. So the FileMaker only has to process the little environment of that little group. It's called a TOG, table occurrence group. It's a group of the table occurrences. If you start cross-connecting them, you're screwed. You basically create a spider diagram, and it makes things unfortunately slower, right? So anyway, any other questions, Miles?
Yeah, the last one that came in, if anyone has any final ones, shoot them to us. But the last one I've got is, can a table have about 20 foreign keys, or is there a restriction?
No, there's no restriction. I mean, you want to, that's why I always start with ID underscore, so that way they're all kind of grouped together. I mean, if you think about the most common module in FM starting point. Let's just take a look at this. So I use a keyboard shortcut to dive in here. Command-Shift-D for those of you. I mean, I guess I can hit cancel. I do it. So I'm here, File. If I go too fast, Miles, you got to stop me because I program my left hand with all the shortcuts. Like Spidey. I got my Spidey web shooter, all my left hand. So I go to File, Manage Database, and I go into Contacts. Contacts is by far one of the most used modules in FM starting point in most any system. It's managing your customers, managing your students, your employees, whatever. I'm going to say, let's take a look at this. And if I go down to ID underscore, there's going to be a bunch of them here. So there we go. So we have ID account, ID asset, ID constant. Remember I said that's the one that gives us our kind of our Cartesian thing. ID contact, primary key. So I technically could underscore it like you underscore in like a P or something like that if I wanted to. And then these other ones could have underscore F, I guess, if you want to. But current note, current to do, record number, ID staff, right? So there's no limit there. You can go and do a whole bunch, right? And you can have technically more than one serial number. Like I could duplicate this and call it ID contact to primary key, right? I mean, the reality is that there's no real reason you can't have more than one primary key, but in the world of databases, they say there's a primary key, it's like the primary key, and you always attach it to that, largely just so you don't get confused, right? But you don't have to use it, but most data systems, it's a unique ID for each record, right? So once again, check out the training. If you have questions, feel free to email us at support@rcconsulting.com. If you're talking to one of your coaches on the Fresh Chat, feel free to make sure you get their name, because when you Slack us or talk to us, instant message us with that tool, it doesn't give us your name or email or anything like that. We have no idea who you are, so make sure you let us know. All right, I appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone, and that'll be the end of our webinar. Next week, there'll be a new webinar every Thursday at 11 o'clock, so feel free to visit us at 11 o'clock Pacific time. Sorry for those of you overseas. We'll give you the recording, all right?